The moment that is the most anticipated by any and every potter is when you open the kiln, because you never really know what happened inside until you open it. So it's kind of this anticipation, this wondering, this, what is it gonna be like? Well, mostly it's artwork, most of the time. But then when I was at Gary's over at his studio, sometimes it's just not working out. And then Gary told me once in a while he has this batch of items, and then he picks one and he chucks it in the woods. And he picks the second one and he chucks it in the woods. And he keeps doing that. Now, Gary, in his very cool way, doesn't show any emotion doing that. I would feel cringing and would have lots of words if no one is in the vicinity to hear me. Maybe Gary has some of those thoughts too, but he would not show them. So, what do we do with pieces that just don't work out because of the tension, there are cracks, or because it's getting too hot and they kind of sag, or the glaze runs and they stick to the shelf, and once they stick to the shelf, both the shelf and the vase or the work of art are gone. So what do we do with that when our plans fall apart, when life goes different than we had imagined and hoped for? What I love about our scripture readings is they're so realistic, they're so real. So when Jesus talks with his disciples and he has this premonition, he knows, not gonna be pretty. And he tells them, you know what? There will be suffering involved. There are no guarantees. I will be hurting. The Romans will get me, and I will be crucified, and I will die. Well, no one really wants to hear that message, do we? We don't. Imagine all the advertisement for, there's a lot of brokenness, a lot of suffering in life, you won't get out alive out of this, and so on. It doesn't sell well, but it is real. And Jesus says, this is how it's gonna be. And Peter, the strong one, who has it all together, says, no way, Jose, this is not gonna happen. I will defend you to my death. So Peter is ready to fight against it. But Jesus said, well, take a step back. That's not God's will. It's not going to happen the way you wish it would happen. And then Jesus brings that opportunity in opening up to the disciples and saying, you know what? There is a deeper wisdom to that for our lives. If we try to run from the pain, it will follow us. Pick up your cross. Pick up your suffering. Offer it to the living one, for God can work with that. That's what Jesus says. And I love the story. One of my favorite stories is the story of the two disciples walking to Emmaus. It was right after Jesus was crucified. They had no idea of the risen Christ, that there was new life, that God raised him to new life. So they're walking heavy-hearted. And Jesus comes and walks with them. And Jesus asks them, what happened? And they start sharing their heartache. They start sharing like, we wished, we had hoped, we had dreamed, we had wondered. It's just not the way we wish it would be. And that is so important, that we share what weighs on us. And in and through that, through their broken dreams and in and through their hopes that were dashed, Jesus hears them and takes that in. And that's the way how Jesus works, and that's the way how God can work too, with brokenness, with broken pieces. When things have a big crack in them, when they don't work out together anymore. What I love about the message, the passage from Paul in the letter to the Romans in the 8th chapter is, he describes, now, Paul had no idea what it is like to give birth, just like I do. Even though I was in the room in the hospital when Sigrid gave birth, no idea. So maybe that's why he is using this image, because he doesn't know. But I think there may be some truth to it. When he says, sometimes it feels like groaning and moaning and things don't work out, the pot cracks, or what you're left is are broken pieces. But, Paul says, you can see that as a process of giving birth, that through the pain and through the suffering, something new can be born, something new can come from it. Not as we had hoped and wished and dreamed for, but in God's own way. God can use that suffering. And sometimes new life is not born without the pain and the suffering. So Jesus' message is, there will be suffering, no way around it. Plus, we'll be crucified in one way or another. Basically, we'll end up. Death is the greatest democracy. We're all included. As soon as we're alive, we know we'll die. So, in our scripture readings, when we look at Mark 8 and at Romans 8, suffering is involved. But what and how can God work with that? How can God work with our suffering? We have images from the natural world. So I love to be on the river, walking by the river and looking at the trees. And you see the American sycamore trees, they're peeling off their bark. It's like this peeling off. Sometimes there's some peeling off when we grow, when we evolve, when we develop, some peeling off going. And did you know that underneath every leaf that will fall off, there is already a bud? Sometimes that bud is actually pushing the leaf off. So there is newness in the falling and in the shedding. That promise is there. The other image is from art and not from nature. You probably have seen that. Kintsugi is the Japanese way of dealing with broken vessels, at least those who are precious and dear. When they break, they don't try to cover it up, patch it over, but they fill the cracks with gold. So in the brokenness, something new can shine through. Or as Leonard Cohen said, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So what do we do with the hurt? What do we do with the suffering? What do we do with our brokenness? Well, sometimes we just look at it, we feel it, we offer it up with the faith and the hope that God is close to the brokenhearted.